I remember my son telling me that the arguments between mom and her new boyfriend were so bad that he used to keep an air horn in his room. And whenever the yelling would get to be too much, he'd blow it off so that they would stop. You know, every time I tried to call my son, I was hung up on, or messages weren't passed on. It didn't seem to matter at all that I had a parenting order. If you've got a stubborn parent who just refuses to listen to it, you have no choice but to be forced to drag back into court to try to get some balls to your parenting order. And of course, the ex didn't suffer any consequences from disobeying the order. Judges are pretty lenient on mothers. In my personal experience, I don't know about yours, but they seem to be able to get away with anything, and no repercussions. Now you have a guy pull that stuff, and you want to count how fast he ends up in jail, but the rules don't seem to be the same. Apparently, we have a penis tax. My son would show up with a persistent cough at my place all the time, and I took him to the doctor. He couldn't find anything really wrong with him, and did a little digging, and after some questions and some evidence, because his clothes would reek and that sort of thing. Turns out they were smoking cigarettes and weed in the house. Keep in mind, kid's 8 years old. And so his clothes, his hair, everything would smell like tobacco or marijuana. And, now I'm not judging against either of those two things, but in a house with children, not a good idea. Part of my parenting time with my daughter, what I fought for in court, I was pretty naive then, so I was just happy that I was finally getting something in writing because I really wanted to see my daughter. And unfortunately, parenting time was set up, like I set it up so that it was after work so that I could drive all the way to the other end of town, pick up my daughter, and then drive all the way back to the other side of town to spend time with her, with my parents around, just to appease her. Well, I want your visits to be supervised. I'm like, oh, I'll play your game. That's fine, as long as I get to see my kid. So I drive all the way to my parents' place, spend a little time with her there, and then have to drive all the way back. Now, this was set up during rush hour, so if I was even 2 to 3 minutes late, the new boyfriend would stop me at the door and tell me, well, you're late. We've already made plans for her, so try again next week. That's the kind of people that you're dealing with here. And I was pretty naive, didn't quite understand the court system, and didn't realize that how much they were able to get away with, in regards to keeping you from your own child. So I got 4 hours with my kid for 2 days a week, 4 hours. During rush hour, right after work, I would race over to one end of town. It would take me about half an hour. Pick up my kid, drive all the way to the other side of town. That would take another half an hour. And so that's 1 hour gone. And then you got to count the other half an hour drive back. So do the math. It's very little time that you spend with your kid. And that's what I was able to fight for as a man in family court. Well, God, if I had known then what I know now, I would have been a lot more prepared. But I was naive. And needless to say, it's pretty hard to get quality time in with your kid when you spend most of that time driving back and forth in town, if you're lucky enough to spend any time with them, without the new partner telling you that 2 to 3 minutes late during rush hour equals no time with your kid that week. I don't know how these people sleep at night, honestly. Finally got police enforcement on my parenting clause one year, and I got Christmas that year because we were supposed to swap out. I get them one year, she'd get them the next year. Well, I was lucky enough to get them the first year. Um, and I say lucky reluctantly because I went over to pick them up and nobody home. Phone calls weren't answered. Called the cops, got them involved. They went over there to figure out where my son is. This was, keep in mind, this was in the afternoon of Christmas Eve. The boyfriend answered the door and basically did a pretty good job of evading any responsibility with the police. He told me he didn't know where my son was or his girlfriend. That they didn't say where they were going, didn't say where they were or anything. You don't know where your girlfriend and her son are on Christmas Eve. Okay? So I kept going back there, parking outside, just waiting for them to pull up. Still waiting for them. The cops kept coming back every couple hours. Couldn't get a straight answer out of him. Couldn't figure out where my son was to be picked up for Christmas Eve. Turns out later my son, and this, keep in mind, this went on for a couple of days. I didn't get my son till the evening of Boxing Day. And that was after the cops finally caught them when they were at home. Christmas Eve, he spent some time in the basement whenever someone would knock on the door with my ex-girlfriend's hand over his mouth so that he'd be quiet. And the cops, who were pretty much declawed at this point, weren't allowed to go in and get my son. So they just had to take this guy's word for it that he didn't know where his own family was on Christmas Eve. And my son was being hid in the basement so that I couldn't spend Christmas Eve or Christmas Day with my own kid. So at one point, one of the strategies was to force me to go through supervised visits. You know, because you know how it is when they don't get their way, they claim abuse. So I had to have somebody that I've paid out of my own pocket to come and hang out with me and my daughter while we had our visits. So woman was, very professional, barely noticed that she was there. And my daughter and I would play and draw and go for walks and stuff. And it was really nice to at least get time with her, because that was difficult enough. But I was willing to play by the rules if that's what it took. At least I got to see her. After a month or so of this, we got the report back, and it was glowing reviews. Apparently, the mediator thought that my daughter and I were the best of friends, and that we had a really healthy and loving relationship. And she gave me a glowing review. It was really fantastic. It was also really wonderful to know that glowing review was torn up into a million pieces and tossed into the garbage, and it didn't change a goddamn thing. Because the ex would have nothing of it. And were there repercussions for that? Did I get any leverage in court? No, not really. Moms are always right, I guess, and dads have no rights. So that's what I've learned in my many years in and out of family court. Careful who you pick to have children with, because if they're vindictive or malicious in any way, and if you're fortunate enough to be a male and them being a female, hang on for the ride of your life, because they can do anything they want and there will be no repercussions. Sometimes us guys have to deal with our ex hooking up with some loser that is insistent on playing some twisted game of who's got the bigger penis or who's the better dad. That can be pretty frustrating. I know my experience was this guy was more than happy when we were not getting along and the campaign of hate was strong. But when my ex finally realized the damage that she was doing to our son with this nonstop trashing of me, she decided in a brief moment of compassion and common sense that maybe we'd be better off actually engaging with some civility. So I got a really what at the time I thought was a really sweet message around Christmas, letting me know that we need to bury the hatchet and let's try to make this work, co-parenting. I thought it was the most intelligent and thoughtful thing that she's ever done, and unfortunately it's never happened again. But we did try that for a bit, and boy, was her boyfriend not happy. He would text me all the time trying to pry for information and making stupid accusations, just saying, so what, are you guys back together now? What's going on with you guys? I didn't like this guy. He was abusive. He was a douche. He was always trying to make my son like him more than me. Like, I mean, what? It's not a competition, guy, you know? I'm his dad, right? So live with that. You're an adult. Why don't you act like, my son's opinion matters, right? And his opinion was that he already has a dad and he loves his dad. So why don't you stop trying to change that? Not the smartest guy on the block, right? So when his attempts to try to pry for information failed, because I wanted really nothing to do with having a chit chat with this guy about what me and my ex are talking about. It involves my kid and it's got nothing to do with you, so stay out of it. But then he would send me these subtle threats like, well, if you don't want to tell me what, then we'll deal with this by other means. And he hinted at court stuff. I didn't know that he was actually threatening me until later, when I found out that he was actually coaching my son to try to insinuate that I was abusing him. When you have an alienator, they have a really dark side to them. I don't know if this is a part of them that never grew up or whatever, but it's there's definitely some maliciousness there. And for anybody who would use their kid to hurt you, clearly is missing something upstairs. So with that being said, they're not going to make the best choices of rebound or replacement situation when they get into a new relationship. And this was no exception. She picked the bottom of the barrel, and this guy did not like the fact that I was still in the picture. In fact, he spent the entire time of their relationship trying to shove me out and to be my replacement. Now, if you're one of those people, just realize that the child of the person you're in a relationship with right now, they have parents already. You have been added into the family and you have a role, and it's an important one. But that role is to not marginalize or diminish the other role of the other parent. It is to be a beneficial addition to the family. You're not replacing anybody, or at least that shouldn't be your intent. And you shouldn't use horrible means to get to that if that's what you're doing in the first place. There's no shame. No shame for these people. But, yeah, so watch out for the new partner. make sure that they're decent people, because if you get one that's not, then you've just multiplied your problems by two. So my child support payments were pretty high, so I looked around for a better paying job because I wanted actually to have some money left over to, I don't know, pay rent or eat. So I got this new job, and of course there was like a 2 week um, period there before payday when I was gonna be late with child support for the month. So I called and let my ex know. She was her usual pleasant self, but at least she sounded somewhat understanding and said it was no problem. So I go and pick up my son, and her dad are sitting on the front step while I'm picking up my son. And he quickly runs over to me, gives me a hug. We, do our hellos and everything. Meanwhile, her dad is yelling at the top of his lungs, calling me a deadbeat and telling me how I should pay my goddamn child support. Basically, just yelling this down the neighborhood. Um, didn't expect my ex to back me up at all. She was laughing the whole time, enjoying this whole scenario. I thought I had made myself really clear and that it was just a temporary setback, but apparently that an alienator is more than happy to have some accomplices with them. Now they're doing something horrendous. They're abusing your child by purposely filling your child's mind full of horrible things about you. None of it true, and they have to justify that somehow to friends and family. Because at some point any decent person would go, why are you keeping this man's kid away from him? And so they have to have something that they consider a valid reason. And most of the time, and you know this because you're probably being alienated, is that they have to make shit up, basically, or exaggerate things, because they can't look like the child abuser. They have to try to paint the picture of you as a child abuser, and that way they can justify what they're doing. And don't get me wrong, there are alienators out there who genuinely think through either misinformation or mental illness that they are actually trying to protect a child by painting you out to be this horrible person. It's not going to help garner any sympathy for them, because the fact is they are purposely keeping their child from the other parent due to their own feelings about the other parent, and that's child abuse any way you look at it. So I had to try to get back to the story here. I had to try to get my son into the car, and I'm getting him into the car seat. This idiot actually leans into the car and is still yelling at me about child support after I'd already explained, look, it's going to be 2 weeks here. I started a new job. But the scene that he made in front of my 7-year-old son, all the names he called me, got the whole neighborhood involved, my old neighborhood before I moved away from her and that place. These are the fun times of picking up your kid from the angry ex's house. And it's great when they get their family and their friends involved. In fact, I've had some of their friends text or message my girlfriend, warning her about me, and trying to turn my girlfriend against me, so that they can continue building this campaign of hate. You got to understand, a lot of alienators take a lot of abuse for doing what they do. Generally, those friends are cut off pretty quick. Anybody who disagrees with what they're doing or finds it really unfair or catches them lying, basically, they're cut out of the group right away, because an alienator needs the support of people and I want to say damaged people here, because clearly these people aren't thinking rationally. They only get one side of the story, and they are more than happy to become the virtue minions, you know, trying to, well, they're minions, basically, which means they're running around doing some of the dirty work for the alienators. Some of the most pathetic minions are the ones who end up dating your ex, and then it becomes like stereo douchebaggery, where you got both of them attacking you from all sides. There are the text message harassments, the false claims, the wasted police time, the wasted visits. There's just so much support that they try to garner for their cause. Um, it's all part of the fun of fighting as hard as you can to stay in your child's life after a relationship dissolves. Adults can have a relationship dissolve and it not affect, the thing that they have to do together until the child is of a decent age. And that is raise the kid, treat the kid with love and respect. I can tell you, I have just about never trash talked my ex to my kid. They're a kid. They're too young to be pulled into adult situations, to have to pick sides, to hear about what a horrible person their own parent is. We all participate in a mild form of parental alienation, maybe, as a naive alienator, right? Sometimes something might slip out where you're just upset at your ex and that sort of thing, and you do your best to do damage control during those things. So I've had a few instances like that, but clearly these videos and that sort of thing, they're going to paint a pretty vivid picture of what that parent is like, because my son's at an age now where he can understand that he's been lied to a lot of his life and been coached and coerced into going along with this campaign of hatred. Thankfully, he's such a smart kid. Like he's seen through a lot of the crap. Reached out to me several times. It's been shot down. Mom caught him, or the boyfriend of the month caught him and shut things down pretty quick. But son, if you're out there listening to this, don't give up. Okay. You have every right to be a part of your other parent's life. You have every right. They have no right to keep you from that. You are old enough to make your own decisions, and I don't want you to be afraid to reach out. You talk to whoever you need to talk to make sure that you exercise your right to see both parents, because no one has a right to tell you that you can't have a dad because mom doesn't like the dad you had. It's BS, and you have every right to not stand for it. And that goes for all alienated children. Fight for your rights. You want to see the parent you've been told is such a bad person? Push for it. Because a lot of times we're so caught up in having exhausted our finances with lawyers, been scared away by the BS that comes with family court, have been made fully aware that no one benefits except the lawyers and the judges in those situations. You of all people don't win, and neither parent wins either. Generally, more often than not, the alienator wins for the time being, but thankfully, through karma and through their obvious horrendous actions, the alienators eventually become the alienated. Because no kid grows up going, wow, I could have had a dad or mom the whole time, but they hated that person so much that they kept me from having a dad. And no kid is okay with that years down the line. They've lost a huge chunk of their life with their actual parent because of someone else's hatred. I don't know any kid that can look back and go, yeah, that was totally fine. That's acceptable. No, enjoy your time while you can, alienator, because eventually your kid may not want to have anything to do with this malicious person that they thought was looking out for their best interests, and learned that it was quite the opposite when they were smart enough to figure out what was going on. So when my ex was pregnant, she was a problem for the landlord at the apartment that they were staying at. And so she had nowhere to go. I basically, despite us breaking up and despite how incredibly difficult she was in my life, there's a reason why we're not with them anymore, right? I took her in because I couldn't have my pregnant ex-girlfriend on the streets when she was going to have my kid, right? So I took her into my home, despite having a roommate, try to clear everything up. She didn't pay rent. And she didn't have to, because I wanted to make sure that she was safe. During the entire 2 months that she was at my place, not only verbally, but sometimes physically abusive, and on her phone checking out other men in my home right in front of me and mocking me. Her and her daughter would throw barbs at me, always making fun of me, always trashing me. It got to the point where she started just becoming really abusive. I had to actually have her removed from my place because the abuse was just getting really bad. I couldn't live with her. Like I couldn't date her. I couldn't live with her. I tried my best. Anyway, that did not go over very well. I tried as best I could, but if you're abusive, you're abusive, and you gotta go. So, pregnant or not, I gave her a month to find somewhere else because I couldn't meet with her. Boy, did that set her off. Apparently, if you kick somebody out of your house for being abusive, but you give them plenty of time to find a new place, what they do when they're pregnant is they refuse to tell you when they're giving birth. So I wasn't told when my own son was born. I wasn't allowed in the delivery room. It was 7 days after my son was born before I got a text message letting me know how much he weighed and when he was born. She refused to tell me anything. Up until that point, I didn't even know when my own son was born. Until 7 days later. We had agreed on a name, and she changed the name twice without my consent. She had to change it back because I put up a little bit of a stink. I think that it would be, I think that I should have some say as to what my own kid was named. But again, it's just one of those things where any little leverage they will use against you to maintain the control, the power. It's you are not an important part of the kid's life in their eyes. You don't get a say. You don't get to offer your opinion on your own child. You're just basically, in my life, dealing with that kind of mentality. You feel more like a sperm donor than a parent. And that's basically how I was treated. So when you have an ex that's insistent on maintaining complete control, because it's really about that a lot of the times, power struggle. They want to run things even after they're not in your life anymore. And you try to keep their involvement to a minimum because you do have a kid with them. But if they insist on being there for the visits, and you know they're crazy enough to make your life hell if you push it too far, you let them come. And so, despite my whole family being there, apparently they still needed her to be there to supervise the visits. Lots of fun. She sat on her cell phone the entire time on Plenty of Fish in the other room, while my son and I played on the trampoline and had a decent visit because she wasn't involved. She just wanted and insisted on being there so that we had no doubts in our mind who was running the show. She didn't pay attention to anything, really, except her phone. But she had to be there. Otherwise, it was going to be a huge ordeal. So that was great. Like I said, it's all about power and control. They want to call the shots in your life even after you're done with them. You know, there's a reason why you two aren't together anymore. And they're not going to let you forget it, you know? Even if it means making things incredibly difficult between you and your child. Yeah, it's their call. They get to do whatever they like. You're a man, so you don't have a say. You don't have any rights. Good luck enforcing anything that could give you some false sense of control over your visits with your kid. It's a battle. It's always a battle. And I wish I could say that the law treated us men the same way they treat women, but maybe your circumstances are different. I've seen that proven time and time again in my situation. Did you know that if you have a vindictive co-parent, they can actually call up child services and badmouth you to them repeatedly? They can start a file on you and that sort of thing. And child services apparently doesn't have to contact you or let you know that this is happening. So meanwhile, behind your back, you're being discredited and slandered, and they can get away with that. Child services, being a party to this, can document this, and it just builds up in some imaginary file that you didn't even know you had, without them talking to you, without them asking you any questions. An ex can actually totally trash you to them without your knowledge at all. Isn't that great? Isn't that great to know that that your alienator has all the accomplices they need without you ever being aware of it at all? Getting assisted child abuse from the very foundations that were set up to protect the children. Makes sense, doesn't it?